Hi there. Thank you so much for listening to Grounded in Maine today. I am talking with Jane Lee Rankin, who is an author. She is also a speaker, and she has an agritourism farm called Apple Hill Farm, not Apple Creek Farm, like I keep saying. But Jane, I'm psyched to have you here today to talk about agritourism and all the fun things that go along with that. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited about this. This is going to be a great conversation, I know.
Yes, it already has been. But so Jane is in Western North Carolina, and she has been doing this for, how long did you say you've been doing this?
We started the farm in 2003, so
20 years.
21 years. Yeah,
Yeah. And it started out as wanting to be, you just wanted to have alpacas, you said.
absolutely. That was it. Yeah, just alpacas.
And now it is not quite that.
Alpacas plus. Plus, plus, plus.
Right? But how many alpacas did you say that you have now?
20 right now. 20
20.
alpacas and 5 llamas.
And 7 donkeys.
7 donkeys, 2 horses, probably 20, I'm going to say 25 Angora goats. We have chickens, we have a couple of pigs. We have some cows. So we have 4 livestock guardian dogs,
Oh,
weigh 100 pounds. That puts that in perspective. And 3 farm dogs, farmhouse dogs. So, and then we have chickens,
that's
lots of chickens. So,
awesome.
yeah.
That sounds like it sounds like heaven. Oh my gosh. And so I was telling Jane before we started recording that my idea of agritourism, and I know that it can vary, but my idea was to like staying on a farm, but you don't have people necessarily staying on your farm yet, but you do a lot of education and a lot of events.
Yes, yes. And we have added a farm stay in the last year. That's a 1920s farmhouse. That's a farm stay, but it's not on the Apple Hill farm property. It's actually sort of adjacent around the corner. And there's cows down there, but it's not here at the farm. So,
Right. And so you said it was an orchard. It was an abandoned orchard when you
yeah,
moved.
it was planted in 1960, and we're in the mountains, right? So apples are a fickle fruit when you're in the mountains because sometimes we have a late frost and it kills all the buds, and so we get a harvest maybe from the old abandoned trees maybe every 3 years. So I think they decided it was not super sustainable, so they bailed on it. It was 80 acres to begin with, but we're on a large part of what used to be Apple Farm. We still have the old apple roads that they built through the woods, where they flattened it out so they could drive between the trees, and now it's woods, right? Because if you don't clear a field and keep land or bushes and plants and trees down, it fills in with forest. So
Mm,
it's forest now. So a lot of our forest here on the farm is originally apple orchard.
cool.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And so you were telling me that you use the alpacas for their fiber as well as the Angora goats
hmm We do. And the llamas.
and the
So all
llamas.
three are fiber animals. So
Llamas are
llamas, we
fiber
shear
animals?
them. We shear them not every year, but sometimes we shear them and we can use their fiber for felting and other things.
Wow.
So yeah,
Oh my gosh. I didn't know that about llamas.
yeah. The Angora goats we shear twice a year because they produce so much fiber. So we have 3 shearings a year that are open to the public for people to come watch because that's something that people don't generally get to see is shearing.
Right?
Um, and it's fascinating to watch. So people love coming to see that. We try to have spinners here at the same time, or there's lots of fiber guilds around, so we'll have a fiber guild come and demonstrate. So they'll be demonstrating spinning and weaving,
Mm,
knitting, whatever it is that they have to demonstrate so that people can see the full process.
sounds amazing. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Um, and oh, I just had a thought. Uh, Yeah, I don't have it. I lost it. Ah, okay, but so you do a lot of public speaking,
I
and
do.
this is
I do.
about agritourism, I assume.
Generally about agritourism, sometimes just about the farm, but I speak at a lot of conferences that are agritourism conferences or state conferences. Like I spoke last year at Pick, Tennessee, which is their agricultural conference where they bring in the beekeepers are there and
Hmm.
um, the berry producers are there and all the different aspects of agriculture in Tennessee were there. And I spoke about agritourism.
Cool. That's awesome. And you were
Also,
saying,
like I spoke at our the Southern Strawberry Festival or conference about agritourism because many strawberry farmers are doing U-pick farms, which is agritourism. So I talked about ways that they could increase their agritourism
ooh,
ideas.
technically, is that like, so farms that are offering like you pick strawberries and stuff are technically agritourism.
Agritourism, yes. So
Okay.
agritourism, I define it very loosely as farms plus people. So it's when you get people on the farm to do anything. So if you have a farm and you've renovated a barn and you rent out a wedding venue, that's really agritourism because you're bringing people to the farm, and the farm is a piece of what's so charming about it, why you want to have your wedding there, right? So that becomes agritourism. Wineries that are bringing people out to the vineyard to taste wine, that's agritourism,
Oh,
right?
heck yeah.
That's, yeah. And the breweries that are out in the hop fields, same thing. So
Breweries in the hot fields? What?
hop fields where
Hop
they're,
fields. Gotcha. The hot
yeah,
fields. No.
not no hot fields. Yeah. It's hot right now, but it's not the hot fields. So things like that are considered agritourism because it's bringing people onto the farm. And in North Carolina, we define, every state has their own way of kind of defining it. We define it as a bona fide farm, which has its own levels of it, things that you have to do in order to be a bona fide farm,
Hmm.
open for agritourism activities. That's kind of how we do it, so that you can't just take a field and open up and do a carnival ride and then it's agritourism, right? It has to be a farm. So that's a way to distinguish. And every state has their own distinction. I could get really nerdy about that, but every state has their own way of defining it. So,
Okay. Wow. I did not know that. That's very cool. And it makes total sense. I mean, you're bringing people to your farm and they are learning about what happens there and they're just being part of that. And I think that's really important for people to have that experience for sure. Um, Gosh, she was even there.
she's sleeping. Aw.
My farm dog. Um, but so oh gosh, what do you guys do with all of your donkeys and horses and
So our donkeys actually protect our alpacas. So
mm,
we have donkeys that are in fields that are around our alpaca fields, and they are there for protection.
okay.
So we have two fields at the top of the farm. We have three fields at the bottom of the farm of alpacas, and they are completely encased in donkey pasture so that they protect them. So we're in the mountains, right? We're at 4,200 feet in the mountains. So we're way up in the mountains. We have bobcat, we have mountain lion, we have coyote, we have packs of neighborhood dogs like everybody else might have. So they are our protection. And the llamas actually are their main purpose is protection within the field. So they are living with the alpacas and part of protecting them. The livestock guardian dogs are protecting the goats. So they live in the fields with the goats and then they protect them.
Mm, wow. So much that I still need to learn.
Right? Yeah.
Uh, I'm sure even you're thinking that, like, oh my gosh, I
Oh,
still
the
need,
learning curve never ends. The
yeah,
farming that I don't, maybe it's farming, maybe it's, I don't know. It just seems like there's always something new to learn.
yeah.
And then our
Especially-
chickens, we actually coop. They're cooped 24/7 because we've lost so many chickens to predators. And I hate keeping them cooped, but I
hate
hate losing
losing them.
them. So we've got a guinea, and guinea are supposed to be protectors, and he's the last of four that got picked out of trees. And I said, nope, that's it. You're coming inside. And it's like it's either bring him inside or risk losing him, and that just doesn't, you know. I mean, I plant daylilies and they just become food for the deer, but it's different when it's a live animal. Like just, oh,
Right?
here's next meal. I'm gonna just feed the hawks or whatever, the owls or whatever it is that's grabbing them. So,
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Um, it's so true. It's so true. I mean, I know that the chickens are so happy when they're out free and roaming and picking through the ticks and whatever, but it just breaks my heart whenever I lose one.
right, right, right. Which can happen in the coop, even.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. But so I love your description, your definition of agritourism. I did not, like I said, I didn't know that, but I think that that is even though it may be loose, I think it makes total sense. Because we need to understand what it's all about. Like I think and it's so important to I mean I keep saying to like find awe and to recognize the beauty in the earth and everything that's happening, but it's also it's a different feeling. It's a different feeling. I mean, you're like backing up, you're slowing down and these animals being around them, just like you when you read that petting a cat will like lower your blood pressure
Oh, yeah, yeah.
and it's good for your heart and stuff like that. It just animals in general, I think, unless they're being crazy, but how often are they crazy?
Right, right. And there's that whole new grounding movement, right? And I feel like being on a farm is very grounding. It's very grounding for me.
Mhm.
And I think that's one of the things we hear from our customers is that they just feel different after they've walked around on the farm. But when do you walk around on farmland, guided so you're safe and with somebody there to answer questions and to lead you through the farm and learn new things and see, beautiful vistas and learn about these animals and how, especially ours, how they all work together because it's a very tight ecosystem where the dogs are protecting the goats and the goats are providing fiber and like we've have these multi layers of uses and interaction between animals.
Mm.
So I think it is very grounding.
And I think that's so beautiful that they all have their place. And they're taking care of each other and they're taking care of you and you're taking care of them and it's a beautiful circle.
Right.
But I think it's also so important for people that are not farmers to understand the process and to appreciate what goes into it because I mean
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm a big supporter of the farmers that prepare food, and I want to know their practices. I want to know the what they're doing and how they're doing it, and I feel so much better knowing where my food is coming from.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. And I think there was a huge turn towards that during COVID when our food system got interrupted, which was, I mean, I don't know what it was like where you were, but here for weeks there was no ground beef in the grocery store. You could not buy ground beef. And I think people got really scared and it was like, wait a second, how is this system working and or not working? And what is like does it all happen?
Mm.
And that is still in the agricultural world, right? Is still a big upend where we're trying to change that system because what happened here in North Carolina was that you could not get into a facility to process beef anywhere. So, like it used to be, if you were raising cattle, you would call the processor and say, I got three I need to bring in. And they'd say, we'll bring them on this date. And it was maybe 2 months out or a month out.
Right.
But during COVID, it was a year and a half out.
Yeah.
Well, there's a big difference between my steer that I'm going to beef today and a year and a half from now. Like, as in, it's not the same quality meat.
Right.
So it was a big problem. And there were there were lots of people that jumped in to solve that during COVID. But the system is still being fixed. It takes lots of money to build a plant like that.
Mm.
And we're still fixing that. And I think there's a real turn towards small farming. The small farmers, the farmers markets that could or couldn't operate depending on what time of year it was, those had a huge bump. We have a food hub here, which is it's amazing how they've done this. So you can, as a farmer, you can put food up for sale, and then you as a consumer can come in on a website and buy. And you might buy from 20 different farmers, but it all goes in your little box that you
Oh,
pick
nice.
up on a day. They had a 400% increase during COVID of customers because it was one of the safest places to go to get food. It was the safest food, and it was one of the safest places to go because you pulled up outside the ag center and somebody brought a box to your car, right? It was exactly what we were doing at the grocery store. So things like that have really, I think that really woke people up and turned them in directions they might not have gone in before, and they've stuck with it.
Yeah, I mean, when I was in Maine, there was a farm drop was a very, it sounds very similar. Like
Mhm.
just you order from a website and you order whatever you want from all the farmers that are available,
Yes.
and you just pick it up on Friday afternoon.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. And and it took a group of people who are willing to figure out how to set that up and how to bring the farmers in and you know,
But it's so cool that the farmers know that their stuff is going locally. They know what's expected.
right,
It's not like you're going to a farmer's market with whatever you have available. You know exactly what's going out because people have ordered it already and you already paid for it. Uh,
right,
and then people know where their food is coming from and it's not like super far, so they can actually call it local.
right, right.
Beautiful. I love it. I can't,
It's a
I'm
it's
so
an
excited
amazing
that it's already there.
it's an amazing thing. And we sell um so alpaca poo. This is always so funny. This conversation always goes here, but alpaca poop is a bean. So it's a bean shape. The llama poop is a little bit bigger. Same idea. It doesn't need to be composted to be used. So you can use it dried on any, we can use it wet, but you can also use it dried on anything. Like you put it on your houseplants. Now that's a really far stretch for Joe Q Public, right? Is to put
Mhm. Poop can-
alpaca beans around their houseplants, right? It doesn't smell, there's no odor, and the materials, the good materials, leach into the through the water into the soil.
Mm.
So we sell it as a tea, quote,
Right.
an alpaca poo tea in a burlap sack, and you just stick it in a bucket of water, and then you use that to. So we sell that at the food hub, and we are
Awesome.
able to rent a very small little cubicle, and that is there already at the food hub. We just restock it when it runs low, and then they have that to pull for our orders. We also sell alpaca and Angora goat sort of bird nesting stuff. So it's in a suet feeder, and the birds will pull the fiber out to make their nests. We sell that through the food hub.
Awesome.
So the food hub becomes a place for us to sell product as well. We have excess eggs, we'll sell that. We do have a vegetable garden, so we'll plant a bunch of garlic in the fall, and then in the spring and summer we have a bunch of garlic come in all at once, more
Mhm.
than we can use. So then we'll sell that on the food hub. And we put up what we have, right? So if we have 10 heads of garlic, we put up 10 heads of garlic. And we don't have to feel like, oh, we're so small, we only have 10 heads of garlic because it ends up in your box, right? And you wanted one. So it's just such a brilliant way. I love when things come together so like sync together in some way that it creates something bigger than it is.
Yes. And everyone wins. It's just so,
Everybody wins.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, I I want to learn more about that. That's so awesome.
Yeah.
I want something like that here in Virginia now. And I need to see if there's something like that already. But that's fantastic. And I love that, it doesn't cost, I don't think, at least Farm Drop did not cost anything to join. And you just, you lose like a percentage of your cost, but um I just love that anyone can join, anyone can be part of it. And if you have excess anything, you can just put it
Right.
up there.
Hmm.
And awesome. I love it. So you guys are doing like everything. You've got the animals, you've got the agritourism, you've got you're doing vegetables and making fibers and stuff like that. Like it's like full circle, all the stuff.
As much as we can, yeah. And we just, as we do it longer, we find ways to um, create more like ways to find revenue and more ways to make it work together.
Mm.
We're
Yeah.
always looking for that next thing that can, um, we're looking right now at a very, I don't even know, biodynamic kind of fertilizer that we can use that will lessen the weeds that we have. So that means that lessens the amount of time we have to spend on our fields,
Oh my gosh, yes.
those kinds of things. We're always looking for things. And I think that that's normal for farmers to look for that because everything is time, energy, money, right? So you've got to look for ways to lessen the money you have to spend and increase the time you have and and
Right.
make something out of the energy that you have. So,
Yeah, for sure. Um, that's awesome. I mean, I had a podcast guest not I don't remember how long ago. It's been a little while, but her name is Kari. She's in Georgia and she sells alpaca poop. She calls them magic beans. She calls herself a duty dealer.
that's great. That's so awesome. I need to write that down. Duty dealer. It's so funny. It's so funny.
Oh gosh. Um, it just makes me cry thinking about it because it makes me laugh all the time. But I just love it. And she literally walks around. She walks on her farm in a leather skirt because she used to be in design. And she's like, I
Uh,
refuse to give that up. So
that's awesome. That's awesome.
I think that's it. So do you guys do bees on your farm?
We do. We have bees.
You
So we
do?
have honey. Yep. We do.
Wow.
We
Really?
have a beekeeper that does our bees. We don't do it ourselves. So, um, and he used to, he has not. So originally when we started working with this beekeeper, he would take the bees down to Statesville, which is a little bit different climate than here for the winter. So they would leave here and
Oh,
go for the winter. I don't know. He hasn't done that for a couple of years, and I know he still has a bee yard down there, but for us, that was great because often they don't survive the winter. So we, yeah, we started out doing our own bee thing, and then very quickly it was like, maybe we need to get somebody who knows a little bit more about this than we do. So we
that's
sell a
one more
lot
thing.
of honey, and we have still have apple trees, so it's a great thing to have bees here for the apple trees, and it's so fun when they used to take them away and bring them back. That first week that they brought them back, I would walk around the farm going, "Oh, here's one of the bees," and I would be, I
Yeah,
mean,
pretty
you
much.
get pictures of bees everywhere, like on every dandelion and every,
Oh gosh, I love them.
because it's so cool to have them here. And I find that so wasps are often something that we battled with in the spring, but if we have bees, the wasp population goes down. I think it's a territory kind of thing. Now, it doesn't help with the ground bees and the hornets necessarily, but it does help with wasp. So we don't have as many wasps as we used to. Like we used to always have wasps that were inside that I don't know where they came from that would, it could be a warm day and then suddenly you'd have three wasps in the house or at the barn or whatever. But we don't have that like we used to because the bees.
Hmm, that's really cool. I
Yeah.
mean, that's a good thing to know. Get bees.
Mhm.
Get bees, everyone.
Get bees. Yeah. No, bees are amazing. And for a while I was the beekeeper. I'm actually allergic to bees, but I was the beekeeper for a while. And I don't know if you've ever had a chance. And I think that this has become a new agritourism thing that has to do with bees and they put you in a suit and you get to go out. The most sacred place that I've ever been is next to a beehive. The energy from the beehive is just amazing. And when you open the hive and you're part of that space, it's like a temple. It's really amazing. So, um,
I will take your word for
yeah.
that.
If you ever see a bee experience where you can go out with a beekeeper when they're doing the hives, and that is a new agritourism kind of thing. Take it, do it because it's really cool. And for a while we had an observation hive where you could see the bees working behind glass, but it's a tricky thing and the bees are okay for only so long in an observation hive. So unless you have a beekeeper on hand to kind of go, wait, we're not gonna, whatever. And our temperature changes here are so hard. So
Hmm.
we can, we can have a 50-degree night in the summer, right? So in the fall, we can have a 40-degree night and it's glass. And so that
Right.
goes right into the beehive. So it's a little tricky.
Hmm.
But if we had a beekeeper on hand, I think we could do that. Like if we had somebody working for us, it was a beekeeper 24/7 here,
Right.
it would be one thing. But to do that with somebody who's not on site is a little bit harder
Hmm.
to see when they're getting ready to swarm or they're getting ready to
Right.
whatever. And so the area we're in is actually a temperate rainforest. Right. So we get a lot of rain here and we have a lot of growth and a lot of green and a lot of flowers. And
Hmm.
so beehives traditionally do really well here, which is great as long as you're tending them, right? Because you've got to keep putting the supers on and I mean they will swarm if you're not careful. So
Yikes.
yeah, and that's, and when they swarm, that just means that they've outgrown, it's like a kid getting to 21 and they're ready to move on. It's like, it's okay, peace out, we're out of here. But, a tornado of bees during a tour is not ideal for most people.
You might be surprised, but you hear that.
I'll never will
People
forget
don't like it.
the first time it happened, and one of the tour guides came back and she goes, there's a tornado of bees headed for the other barn. It's like, what? And if you've never seen it, it's quite dramatic. So,
I imagine. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
so
Um, wow. But so you were a beekeeper for a little while, and then
yeah, for a very short period. Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
said that's not for me.
Yeah. Well, we had somebody who was working for us who was a beekeeper, right? He was up to being the beekeeper and he left, right? Like in April. And I get this phone call from the post office. And it's like, your bees will be here tomorrow. And I'm like, oh, hell yeah, right, right. The bees are coming. The bees
Cool.
that we ordered in October are going to be here. So I ended up being beekeeper. So, and putting them in the hive and maintaining the hive and yeah. So
Allergic to bees.
allergic to bees, yeah. But I never got stung. So
That's
go
amazing.
figure. Yeah.
Wow.
No, they're actually quite gentle as a hive, depending on the bees that you get. They're generally pretty gentle.
Mm.
And if you know what you're doing, you don't have to get stung. Um, so, and I think generally the only time we get stung is when we mess with them, right? Like you run
Wow.
over a hive with a weed eater or a ground hive or whatever.
Whew.
Generally. And I think, when we get stung, I got stung as a kid and I would be at the pool and it was usually they had landed on something and then I touched whatever it was and then they stung me, right? It was not, they don't just like come after you and sting
Right.
you. Not
Right.
mean particularly. So, unless you mess with them. So,
They're much bigger than they are. It's intimidating.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mm.
So,
Okay. So let's how can we go back, like way back to before 2020, 2003? And like, how did you end up, what were you doing before the farm? And how did you decide that that's what you wanted to do? I know it was about alpacas, but like,
I had written a cookbook and so I was like touring with the cookbook, promoting the cookbook, going out and speaking about the cookbook, doing cooking demonstrations, things like that. I also was involved with real estate in Louisville, Kentucky, which is where I was from. And so I was kind of doing those two things. I had just had a child and had just turned 1 and we went to the Kentucky State Fair and I came face to face with an alpaca and everything changed. Like the time stood still. I forgot that I had a kid in a stroller asleep in front of me. Like all of those kinds of things. Like there were no sounds. It was just, it was just like a typical Hallmark moment, right? Like this just me and this alpaca locked eyes. And we stayed there for probably 20 minutes and I was like, that's what I want to do. I'm going to raise alpacas.
just like
And
that.
such a weird and also it wasn't maybe that in that moment, but as time went on and I thought about that moment, it was like that's the coolest animal I've ever seen. And a little bit behind that was I had property and still had it in the Catskills was part of an old dairy farm. So I was in a rural setting. And I used to look at the cows and go, yeah, but no. And my fa brother was in horses, so I would go to his horse farm and I was like, I loved horses. But I didn't want to farm horses, right? So, and as we were walking through the Kentucky State Fair, everything I looked at was like, would I raise that? Goats? I don't know. Chickens? I don't know. Anyway, so I was kind of testing that idea out. And then in the next 6 months, there was sort of things changed in Louisville and I had an opportunity to move. And it was like my purpose in Louisville was finished. And it was like, what was I going to do next? And I was like, I'm going to go raise alpacas. And because I had land in the mountains in the Catskills, I wanted to be in the mountains because I knew at that point in my life that my heart lived in the mountains and my soul lived in the mountains and my body lived in Louisville. And we would go back for the summers and I would just like, oh, I could breathe and it was just so wonderful and whatever. So moving to North Carolina was a way to put all of me in one location and alpacas and the dream of an alpaca farm was sort of the gas engine that got me here.
I love
Because
that.
dreams do that, right? And so we drove here. Now I'm a solo mom, right? I didn't have a partner. And so we drove here, the dog and the child and I. Will was less than 2 at the time we first came. And the whole way here, I'm like, this long 7-hour drive, and I'm like, you are crazy. You have lost your ever living mind, and you are a solo mom, and you have no like, what are you gonna do? You don't have anybody there.
Right.
And so I'm driving and I would hear, well, if it's the right thing to do, I'll find the piece of property. So we
Mhm.
came and spent a month here looking for property, found this place like within the first 2 weeks. I still wasn't convinced it was bigger than I wanted. It was an odd first showing. It was all the things. And I came back and looked at it again and I was like, yeah, this is it. And and it was
An
insane.
alpaca on it. It's a present.
Yeah, right. And so, I mean, it wasn't even a farm, really. It was an old growth orchard that had been abandoned. There was an old Christmas tree farm that had been abandoned too. We joked that we were going to do a Dr. Seuss choose and cut tree farm and sell a hat with every tree because they were like these gnarly trees. And so, that was the first thing we had to do was get rid of all those trees and create fields. And so it was a process to turn it into a farm.
Mm.
But we've never looked back, or I've never looked back. I mean, it was the perfect thing to do. And we didn't know anybody. I mean, I knew my real estate agent. That was kind of it. And people that I had met along the way, because we were here for a month. Um, and Will was a very gregarious child. I used to joke that he was always picking up people at dinner. So if there was, we would stop at a Cracker Barrel and there would be some man sitting there eating his dinner alone. And he would go, would you like to come sit with me and my mom?
Oh,
So he was always picking up people and introducing people to me, and he was such a flirt as a little kid. So he was always picking up waitresses and always picked out the cutest girl, and he'd be flirting with her from across the room. Before we knew it, she was our waitress, and
she
so
was
he
enough.
helped in that way. He helped in that way, so it was good.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. I love that so much of it is resonating with me as like, I just moved and people are like, do you know anybody? Do you have family there? I'm like, no, I don't. My realtor. I know my realtor. I really like
Right,
him.
right, right.
And so I love that you had that same experience. It gives me a lot of hope for myself.
Oh,
Uh
totally, totally.
that it
Yeah,
will you don't have to know somebody there. You make friends and you learn to love it.
yeah.
But it's such a cool story. And I love that as you were driving when you were driving to North Carolina, you were saying that you were like, I'm crazy. What is wrong
Oh,
with me?
yeah, I was like,
Yeah.
yeah. And looking back on it, I realized how crazy I was. I mean, I don't know that I realized it in the moment, but like looking back on it, I'm like, wow, like I don't know, it just is such a brave move, and I was 40, so I wasn't young.
Right.
Um, you know,
Right. Um, I just love that story. I love it so much. And then, and look at how much you've grown. I mean, goodness, I know you said you weren't sure how if you wanted to mention it or not, but you guys, Lee, Jane Lee was just honored in the Hall of Fame for Western North Carolina for what she's doing to bring in um, funds and tourism to that area. And so, she moved from Kentucky to North Carolina knowing nobody and having this crazy plan. And look at her now, like just, bringing people in and educating people. And I just think it's so beautiful that you had this vision and you have this passion for what you're doing, and it just shows and it just attracts people. It's magnetic.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been amazing. It's been an amazing journey for sure. And I now the farm is huge, right? In its own, like the impact of the farm is really big, but
Mhm.
it's even bigger than that because now I go out and speak and work with people, and I've written a book, so now it goes beyond the farm.
Yeah.
And that was one of the purposes of the book. Second purpose of the book was to take the farm beyond the footprint of the farm because not everybody can come, right?
Right.
So that it's not people's experience of the farm is not limited to coming to the farm with a book.
Ooh, yeah.
So,
That is that a lot of pressure, like to write a book about your farm to s-
um,
people get the
well,
full experience as full as possible?
yes and no. Yes, I mean, but I'm a writer, right? So it's kind of like having a goal of starting an alpaca farm. Like I had the idea to write the book, and then it's the idea that to write the book
Hmm.
that carried me along that path, right? And I originally with the book, I was going to write a nonfiction story of starting the farm. Very, very, whatever. And I had actually pitched it years before as a cookbook, right? So it was a cookbook of my recipes with the story of starting the farm.
Hmm.
This was years ago. And one of the people we pitched it to said, I want the story of starting the farm separate from the cookbook. And when you get that together, I want to look at it. Of course, she's no longer an editor. But anyway, so that was one of the inklings of that. And then so the idea was just to write this book that was the story to answer that question. Because when I'm on a tour, occasionally there will be this moment as we walk up the hill by the goats, right? We're by the goats, and it's like halfway through the tour, and people would turn to me and they would, I mean, some people, not everybody does this, but every once in a while there'd be somebody and they'd be like, okay, so how did
Right.
this happen? Like they totally get the farm and they just are like, they're enamored and they're like, how did you do this? Like how, why, what, when? And that was the question behind the book, like answering that question for myself, right? As well as other people,
Right.
which a good book does, right? As the writer, you're answering a question you don't know the answer to. So very quickly in the writing of the book, it became memoir, which is a whole different ball game.
Right.
And so it's a very personal story um, of all of it. Kind of starts when I find out that I'm pregnant and I'm just dating somebody and like, oh no, what am I going to do? And I was also a breast cancer survivor, and so there was all the medical side of is it safe for me to carry a child and
Mm.
all of that. And I'd always wanted to have children, and I was like, heck no, I'm running. I'm taking the goods and running. Like, we're going to do this, right? So
Right.
first it was having a child, and then it was as a result of having a child and going to the fair, it was a chance for me to see there was something else I wanted to do.
Mm.
And then I look back and it's like it's just been this constant progression of the next, the next, the next. So yeah,
Everything as it should be.
yeah, yeah. I think that, and I think that that's actually true. I always felt like when this happened, it would have been harder to stop it than to go with it. And I think that that's really true with life. I just don't think we give it that credit,
Mm.
right? We get into a career and we're really good at it. It's like it would be harder to stop that than to go there.
Right. Totally. Yeah. I mean, I feel like I mean, just like on a personal level, like the last like month or so, before moving, I was hitting like stops at every point, and people are like, "You don't have to move." I'm like, "No, really." Like
I have to
the
move.
week before, the all the paperwork wasn't going through, and people are like, "Maybe it's not meant to be." I'm like, "I will be darned." Like this is all moving, whether I'm going or not. Like it would be harder to stop it, like you're saying. Um, like So I totally feel that. And I love that I just love your story. I think that's so fantastic. And I think that it's so cool that the way that you that I have not read your book. I need to read your book because I the way that you speak about it, I imagine would be how you would write about it. And it just it's so um I don't know, it's just it sounds just very true to you. And
Mhm.
you just have such a personality that you would, as a storyteller, you have a lot to say. And I just think that it sounds like it would be a really, really great book.
Thank you.
So what is the book called?
It's called Farm Family,
Oh, it's the one right behind you.
a solo mom's memoir of finding home, happiness, and alpacas.
So there's a colon in there.
Yeah. Well,
Or
there's a subtitle. Yeah. 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 And alpacas are part of it. So, and Aspen is on the front of it. Aspen is the cover boy. So, you'll see on our
your
social
son?
media, we did a reveal of the book. The unboxing of the book is with Aspen there watching.
Fine. Awesome. Oh
He's
my
all about being the cover boy.
God, sure. I'm very
He
sure.
like parades around. He's like, I'm on the cover of a book.
And what's the title of your cookbook that started the
It's
whole thing?
called Cooking Up a Storm, and it is I wrote that when I was in Kentucky, and it was about Annie Johnson, who worked with our family when I was growing up. She was like my nanny,
Okay.
right? She worked for our family 5 days a week, and so she and I became really close. So it's her recipes and the story of our lives together. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's a story that goes full circle because she worked for our family, and when she retired, the only way for me to see her was to go to her house. And I started doing that, and she had remarried, so I was spent time with her new husband, and we got to be friends outside of her working for the family. And then she got sick, and I helped care for her. So it went full circle, right? So she started out caring for me. She started working for our family when I was 6 weeks old, and everybody had chicken pox except for my dad. And she was actually loaned to us by my godmother. And I only found out after writing the book that my mother kind of stole her from like
Oh,
and hired her away from my godmother, and she was still kind of upset about it. It was kind of funny. But anyway, so Annie then came to work for us. Mother had 4 kids. There were four of us, but in within 6 years, right? So it was a pretty tight.
everyone had chickenpox.
And everybody, yeah, right. And so that's how she started working for us 1 day a week, and then gradually mother kind of lured her away.
Right? Now, is there this is a cookbook, but
The
there's
cookbook,
story included.
story and recipes.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love that. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
It's a readable cookbook. We used to sit around, my mother and I and Annie used to sit around and read cookbooks. Like at lunchtime or something, we would sit and we would be looking for a recipe, and we'd be like, Look at this recipe, and it tells this story about it." And we would like read those to each other so that it's a readable cookbook.
Oh my gosh. I have to come to your farm. Oof. That sounds so fantastic. I'm like a cookbook hoarder. It's like that's my
Right.
thing. I love it. And I love that story. My gosh.
Yeah,
That's
it's all Southern food, so it's really good
yeah,
old-fashioned recipes. A lot of people are like, "This is just the way my grandmother used to make it," or "and we never got her recipe," or and it was interesting because Annie was in her 80s when we wrote the book. So I would go to her place with groceries, and we would cook to get because they were all in her head. She didn't
right.
have anything
Right,
down.
right.
They're all in her head. And then I would, instead of, because you can't, like, if somebody's a really good cook, you have to let them cook. So I would measure things. So I'd measure the bowl before and after she put something in to get the weight. And then I would go back. I was living in the Catskills at the time. I would go back to the Catskills and I would convert them into recipes.
Hmm.
And every spoonful of Crisco was always the same measurement. Every one. Like how that happened. And it was never off. It was never 1 tablespoon and a tablespoon and a teaspoon. It was always a tablespoon, or it was always a whatever. And she used 1 carrot if she was making something. She didn't use 2 tablespoons of chopped
Right.
carrot, right? Which is how we, like
Carrots
in
and
the
carrots.
culinary world, learned to cook, right? So it was a very wholesome way of cooking, and there was so much in that. It was a great process. It was so fun.
Mm.
Um, but there's no garlic in that cookbook. None. She didn't cook with garlic. But back in the 60s and 70s, if you weren't Italian, did you cook with garlic? You probably didn't. That's something that we all learned to cook with
Oh,
after that, right? So it really is a culinary, it's an interesting slice of somebody's world of what they cooked with.
I did not know that. That's really interesting. Um, wow, gosh. Oh, I need to, where's my my book list? Add those to my book list.
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? Because I'm from a culinary standpoint, like my mom, I can remember my mom going to there was a place that sold like a tableware place, and they would do these cooking classes. And she took a class on, it was like curried fruit, right? This was probably in the 70s, early 70s, and it was that curried fruit thing where you could use canned peaches or you could use fresh, and you would do butter and a curry powder. Well, curry was not something that Annie ever cooked with because that was not
That's not
part
sweet,
of the repertoire to cook with curry. And so it is interesting. It's interesting to look at where things come from and how we are introduced to them and how much the culinary world has come since 2000 or
right? And
1980.
yeah, so you, whew, this book, were you a cook? Did you?
I went to culinary school. I went to culinary school. So I had I don't know what your question is, but I think that's what
That?
you're asking. I went to culinary school. So I did have a degree in culinary, whatever. And then when I came out of culinary school, I realized that I compared so much of what I learned to how Annie cooked. So
Hmm.
I came back and I asked her if she would give me she'd never given anybody her recipes. She would give me her recipes and she said yes. And so then we started, and the idea was for it to be a tribute to her and women like her who served our families and the difference that they made in our families. I mean, my mother was an alcoholic and things were, I mean, it was typical back then, but it was not typical. And Annie was the backbone of our family. And I knew that who she was why I was who I was
Mm. Oh
in
my
so many
gosh.
ways. It had made such a big difference in my life. So it was a tribute to her. So
Cool. And do you have other cookbooks, or was that was your
that was
first?
my first book,
Yeah.
cookbook. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
you were touring with that and you saw the alpaca and
Well, I was touring with that, and that's what I was doing when I became pregnant. And then Will came along, so then I was doing the momming thing and then the alpaca. So it kind of all progressed along.
as it should be.
Right.
That's amazing. And so your one of the messages that you wanted to share was the connection with animals. And I know that you've said it sort of roundabout, but what's your exact point with that? Like,
So I am I'm an animal lover from, really early on. And I told somebody, they said, "Are you all going to get more animals? Like, how many more animals is going to be enough?" And I'm like, "I think I'm good. I think this is enough to keep me grounded." Right? I got the balance now. We've got a
enough.
bunch of animals. So I've always had animals and I have a really strong connection with them. Um, and people joke that when I walk around the farm, it's like all the animals know that I'm mom, even though I'm not the one that does everything that is done for them. It's like they kind of know. So I have a really strong bond with animals, and I also see the impact it has on other people. So we'll go out with alpacas for different events. And I've always said we need to put a GoPro on the back of the trailer so that we can get people's faces as they come and interact with the alpacas, because it's like people light up, right? And it's not everybody, but it's most people. Right. So as people walk around the farm, even you'll see. And I joke that we'll have people get here, right? And the car pulls up, and you can tell that there's been a fight on the way there. Somebody forgot their shoe on the way out the door. Like it's a family, right? And all the stuff that goes on with families. There's kids, there's who forgot to feed the cat, there's we need to leave now to get there on time, all that angst, right? And they get out of the car and you can tell there's like this whatever. And by the time they finish the tour, they come back in, they're a cohesive unit. They've had a great time. They've been laughing. They've learned something, which does something to us, right? They've
Mm.
walked around out in the open air. They've met all sorts of animals, heard stories about animals. So there's the story component, right? Because we have horses, but we don't have horses to have horses. We rescued horses. So there's that aspect of it. Their hearts have been touched, and they're different. They're different people. And I think that animals are a huge piece of that. They would not come here to see, oh, we have corn over here and tomatoes over here, right? Like that would not be the same draw for a family.
Right.
So so it's animals. Animals have that incredible connection for us. We are animals, right? As Elizabeth Gilbert said, we have to remember that we're animals too. And there's that connection. And as the other thing is, as you walk around the farm, there's every animal has their own energy field, right? The goats are very different than the alpacas, and the dogs are very different than the goats, and the chickens are very different than the, and so there's this full array of animal experiences and energies that people experience.
Mm-hmm. It's like an ensemble, sort of.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's very cool. And so your horses are rescues.
Rescues, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, we have Luna, who is the daughter of a rescue. Her mom has since gone to, we have another farm, a second farm that my mother runs. My mother died when I was like 25. So my mother and my brother who died run the other farm called Heavenly Acres. So that's where we send all the animals when they leave, as they go up to Heavenly Acres. And we have this ongoing joke that if it's a really, really sweet animal, I might get a thank you note. So
My
and that's how
God.
we eat, right? So they all sort of go to this sister farm, where they have, we celebrated the first llama they got, and it's like, oh, she's got enough alpacas now. She needs a llama,
Oh gosh.
right?
Oh my gosh. That's awesome. Oh,
Yeah. So, yeah. So,
and so you have all of these animals and you have people come to experience that and to feel that grounding, that connection.
mhm.
And it's just so important. Oh my gosh. I mean, I've always felt that same connection with animals like you did, like you do. Like I just there have been a lot of points in my life where I was alone and you could always depend on them to need you and to give love and stuff like that. And so I totally get that. And it's so important. And people who even people who don't have animals would realize that, I would think, if they showed up and they were like, "Oh, look at
Right.
that like the gleam in their eye, the way that they look at you, the way that they interact with each other." It's so healing.
Yeah.
Mm, awesome. And we could all use a little bit of that, I think. Um, but so, Jane, when I say the word sustainability, what does that mean to you?
So I think of sustainability, maybe a little bit different than other people. This idea of things being interconnected and serving a higher, maybe a higher purpose, um, and um, and taking there's that element of taking care of the environment, but also recognizing the environment. So what's sustainable for me in a temperate rainforest would not be sustainable to somebody in the in Arizona in the desert, right? Like it's very different. And I think, we work to integrate everything we have going on in ways that takes it to the next level. And there's always more ways we can integrate it and be more sustainable
Mm,
in how we do it. So I think of it as a bigger, maybe a bigger picture than some people do. We do the typical sustainability things like we don't use Roundup, we don't, we hand pull weeds, we work with as many native plants as we can. Those are levels of sustainability. But there's also an element of taking it bigger than that, that we're selling the alpaca poo, that we're educating people about farming and land,
mm,
that they things that they may not know, which I think spreads sustainability. Does that make sense? Like it
mm,
spreads that sense of it. Like people don't realize that if you don't keep a field mowed or eaten or in production that it becomes forest. And
Mm.
it's really hard to go from forest to field. Same thing is if you sell the land to development and it gets developed into a subdivision, it very rarely goes
And
back,
undo that. Yeah.
right? Like so those kinds of elements of sustainability. So it's a very wholesome kind of thing. And it's different in every situation, every with animals and in every situation, trying to figure out how do we raise animals in a way that is takes care of them and takes care of us,
Mm.
right? And produces the best fiber. And there's all those things to think about.
Right.
There's multifacets in sustainability that I don't think always gets talked about in sustainability. So,
Mm.
um, if I don't know if that answered your question or not, but it's such an interesting. I was just at a meat conference and it was, everybody was talking about regenerative farming and sustainability, and there were these words that I felt like were so underdeveloped to serve what it is we need them to serve.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah. I mean, they're words that are thrown around a lot, and that's why I ask what it means
Yeah,
personally to
yeah,
you. Because sustainability is so huge and
it
it
is
can
huge.
it can mean so many different things. But like,
Right,
every week I have a person that I can say, what does it mean to you?
right,
But and then regenerative agriculture is another one that is, it's used a lot lately. And, what does that uh, it's going to mean something different to everyone as well in their own way.
right.
But thanks for that. And then so lastly, how can people find you at
So
Apple
our
Farm?
website for the farm, which is kind of the portal to everything the farm, is applehillfarmnc.com. And we're on Facebook, Instagram as Apple Hill Farm NC. So you can find us there. And like I said, we're in the Western North Carolina mountains. So that's where we're located. So we're close to Virginia, close to Tennessee. We're near that corner of North Carolina. So
Okay,
near Boone, where App State is. So
gotcha. And the books, are they on the
book
farm?
is on the website, but you can also get it on Amazon Farm Family. And if you look for Jane Lee Rankin, you'll find actually both the cookbook and the book are there. The fastest way to get the cookbook is to order it from the store because we have to ship it to Amazon for them to ship it to you. Not the most sustainable model. If talking about sustainability, it's not the most sustainable model, but it is on. You can get it through Amazon, but it's faster to get it through the store.
Okay. And the
And we
cookbook.
have an online store on our website.
Oh, cool. You said the cookbook again is called Cooking Up a Storm.
Cooking Up a Storm, and it's Jane Lee Rankin as well. So
Awesome. Wow,
yeah, it's been
Jane.
great. What a great conversation. And hey, I've got to welcome you to the neighborhood because you're just in Virginia.
Yay.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think probably what, maybe 3 hours away because you're on the eastern side of Virginia, southeastern, right?
Center, I
South
think.
central. Well, so I think it's
I'm
about,
not far from the Blue Ridge Mountains, like
yeah,
or maybe.
yeah. So,
Thank you.
yeah. So
This
it's
has been
been great.
amazing. Yeah, and I cannot wait to dive into the books and come see you at the farm and
Yeah.
all the
Yeah.
fun stuff.
And there's agritourism farms just about everywhere in the United States. So if you're not close to where we are, look it up, find a farm, go experience a farm and support the farmers because they're doing really good work and they have a lot to teach
Mm,
all of us.
yeah.
Whether they're raising flowers or corn or whatever they're raising, they have a lot to offer the world right now and they need us,
Right.
right? They need us as consumers. It's not an easy time right now to be a farmer. The inputs have gotten so expensive to run
Mhm.
a farm. And
Well, thank you for that because I was trying to figure out how to add that in and I couldn't find the right
yeah,
words.
no, it's really important. It's really when you add gas prices, fertilizer prices, I mean, we don't particularly
Labor.
the labor, yeah, it's a really and weather. I mean, in North Carolina, we've just had this hurricane come through and so some farms got 18 inches of rain.
That's
And you think about, okay, well, you planted a late corn crop and it was planted for a week, did the seed survive? If you plant, you know, like
Mm,
there's all those issues that farmers deal with on a daily basis
mhm.
that I don't think people realize how difficult it is. So,
Very, very true. Oh my goodness. So thank you again for this message. I'm so glad that you are doing what you're doing and
thank you.
that you found that alpaca so many years
I
ago.
know, right? Like who knew?
And so, yeah, folks, if you are in the Western North Carolina area, please go to Boone and check out Apple Hill Farm and uh, get the books and, find her on the socials and if not Jane's farm, go to someone else's.
Yeah. Yep.
Support those that feed us and support those that are doing the good work.